The most horrific medical experiments ever. Imagine waking up on an operating table, fully conscious, while a doctor removes your organs one by one without anesthesia. Now, imagine that doctor has a PhD from Harvard and genuinely believes he's helping humanity. This isn't some twisted Netflix horror series. This actually happened for decades. With government funding, between 1932 and 1972, respected medical professionals conducted experiments so brutal that even the creators of Saw would be like, dude, that's too much. And the worst part? Most victims had no idea they were even part of an experiment. Welcome to the absolute nightmare that was 20th century medical research. Look, we all complain when our doctor is running 20 minutes late, or when they ask us to rate our pain on a scale of 1 to 10. But what I'm about to tell you will make you grateful for every single consent form you've ever signed. We're talking about decades of sanctioned torture disguised as science, funded by governments and universities that are still operating today. Harvard, Stanford, the CIA, the US, Public Health Service. These stories are so insane that your friends literally won't believe you until you show them the receipts. And trust me, the receipts are absolutely horrifying. Number 5. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study. Picture this. It's 1932, and you're a poor black farmer in rural Alabama. The Great Depression has destroyed your life, and suddenly a government doctor shows up at your door, offering free healthcare, hot meals, and transportation to medical appointments. Sounds too good to be true, right? Well, it absolutely was. This was the beginning of the Tuskegee Syphilis Study, basically like if Get Out was a medical documentary that lasted 40 years. The U.S. Public Health Service told 399 black men they were receiving treatment for bad blood, which was their racist way of saying syphilis. But here's the kicker that'll make your blood boil. They weren't treating anything. For 4 decades, these doctors watched syphilis slowly destroy these men's brains, hearts, and nervous systems. Because apparently watching people die was more scientifically valuable than, actually saving their lives. Even when penicillin was discovered as a cure in the 1940s, they actively prevented these men from getting treatment. They told local doctors not to treat them. They blocked them from getting drafted into World War II because military doctors might have cured them. By the time this nightmare ended in 1972, 128 men had died directly from syphilis, 40 wives had been infected, and 19 children were born with congenital syphilis. The government's response when this finally went public? Oops, our bad. They paid out $10 million in settlements, which works out to about $25,000 per destroyed life. That's less than what most people spend on a Tesla. And here's the part that'll mess with your head. This study was so famous in medical circles that it was cited in textbooks. Doctors were literally learning about it in medical school and thinking, yeah, this seems fine. It's basically like if everyone knew about Tiger King but thought Joe Exotic was the good guy. Number 4. Unit 731, Japan's Factory of Death. If you think the Tuskegee study was bad, buckle up, because we're about to enter a level of evil that makes horror movies look like Disney films. We're going to Japan, 1937 to 1945. The Japanese military ran a biological warfare unit in occupied China that they called Unit 731, but the locals had a different name for it, the Factory of Death. And honestly, that's probably the most accurate name for anything in human history. This nightmare was led by a microbiologist named Shiro Ishii, who, fun fact, was never prosecuted for war crimes because the US wanted his research data. Because apparently scientific curiosity trumps basic human decency. Here's what these absolute monsters did. They infected prisoners with plague, cholera, anthrax, and other diseases, then performed live dissections without anesthesia to see how the diseases progressed. They called their victims logs because apparently dehumanizing people makes it easier to saw them open while they're still breathing. Imagine being so evil that you make Nazi doctors look reasonable by comparison. We'll get to them later. But wait, it gets worse. They performed frostbite experiments by forcing prisoners to stick their arms in freezing water, then hitting the frozen limbs with sticks to see how the ice crystals formed in human tissue. They tested flamethrowers and grenades on living people. They even performed surgery to switch people's limbs around, just to see what would happen. It's like if a serial killer got a medical degree and unlimited funding from the government. An estimated 10,000 people died in Unit 731, and that's just one facility. They had multiple locations across China. The most disturbing part? After the war, the US gave Ishii immunity in exchange for his research data, and he lived peacefully in Japan until 1959. Justice served. Am I right? Sometimes the bad guys really do get away with it, and sometimes they get rewarded for being bad guys. Number Number 3. MK-Ultra, the CIA's mind control experiments. Okay, so far we've covered racist government doctors and Japanese war criminals. Now let's talk about the CIA, because apparently the 1950s were just a golden age for psychopathic medical research. MK-Ultra was the CIA's top-secret program to develop mind control techniques, and it ran from 1953 to 1973. The goal was to create the perfect truth serum and maybe some Manchurian candidates while they were at it. Basically, they wanted to turn people into real-life winter soldiers. The methods? LSD, electroshock therapy, sensory deprivation, sexual abuse, and psychological torture that would make Guantanamo Bay look like a spa retreat. And here's the truly insane part. They didn't just experiment on prisoners or volunteers. They dosed random American citizens with LSD without their knowledge. We're talking about slipping acid into people's drinks at bars, restaurants, and even CIA office parties. Imagine going out for happy hour and accidentally ending up on the worst trip of your life, courtesy of your own government. One CIA employee, Frank Olson, was secretly given LSD by his colleagues and jumped out of a hotel window. 9 days later, the CIA claimed it was suicide, but his family spent decades fighting for the truth. Nothing says team building like secretly drugging your co-workers with hallucinogens, am I right? The program involved 44 universities, 12 hospitals, and 3 prisons across the United States and Canada. Your college might have literally been torturing people in the name of science. At McGill University in Montreal, psychiatrist Ewan Cameron, who was literally the president of the World Psychiatric Association, used a technique called psychic driving, where he played recorded messages to patients for 16 hours a day while they were in drug-induced comas. Some patients were kept unconscious for months. One woman, Linda McDonald, went in for postpartum depression and came out unable to recognize her husband or children. She had to relearn how to walk, talk, and use the bathroom. The CIA's response: whoopsie, science is hard. They basically turned a new mom into a vegetable and then shrugged it off. When MK-Ultra was finally exposed in 1975, most of the documents had been destroyed. We only know about it because some files survived in a misfiled box. Makes you wonder what other government programs are still classified, doesn't it? Number 2. Nazi medical experiments. I know what you're thinking. Finally, we're getting to the Nazis. I was wondering when they'd show up on this list of medical horrors. Well, congratulations, because Josef Mengele and his colleagues managed to out-evil everyone we've talked about so far, which is honestly impressive in the worst possible way. At Auschwitz and other concentration camps, Nazi doctors conducted experiments that were so brutal and pointless that even other Nazis thought they were going too far. Mengele, known as the Angel of Death, was obsessed with twins and genetic research. He would personally select twins from incoming trains, then subject them to experiments that included injecting dye into their eyes to see if he could change their color, sewing twins together to create conjoined twins, and amputating limbs without anesthesia. Because apparently regular murder wasn't creative enough for this psychopath. But Mengele wasn't the only one. Dr. Sigmund Rascher conducted high-altitude experiments by putting prisoners in pressure chambers and watching them slowly suffocate as the air pressure dropped. He also froze people to death to study hypothermia, then tried to revive them using various warming methods, including forcing them to have sex with prostitutes, because Nazi science was apparently just as perverted as it was evil. Dr. August Hirt collected Jewish skeletons for his research by measuring prisoners, photographing them, then gassing them and stripping the flesh from their bones. He wanted to create a museum display, proving Jewish racial inferiority, which is both scientifically worthless and morally bankrupt. Here's the part that'll really mess with your head. Many of these doctors were respected academics before the war. They had medical degrees from prestigious universities. They took the same oath to do no harm that your family doctor took. But when given the opportunity to torture people in the name of science, they jumped at the chance. After the war, some were prosecuted at the Nuremberg trials, but many escaped to South America or were secretly recruited by allied governments who wanted their research data. Mengele lived freely in Argentina and Brazil until he died in 1979, swimming at a beach resort. Sometimes the bad guys really do get away with it. Number 1. The Stanford Prison Experiment's Medical Oversight. Now, you might be thinking, wait, the Stanford Prison Experiment wasn't a medical experiment. And you'd be technically right. But here's the thing that nobody talks about. It was overseen by medical professionals who watched college students have complete psychological breakdowns and did absolutely nothing to stop it. In 1971, psychologist Philip Zimbardo turned the basement of Stanford's psychology building into a mock prison and randomly assigned 24 male students to be either guards or prisoners. What was supposed to be a 2-week study on prison psychology turned into a 6-day nightmare that had to be shut down early because the guards became so sadistic and the prisoners so traumatized that it was basically torture. Imagine paying Stanford tuition just to get psychologically destroyed in a basement. But here's what makes this a medical horror story. Zimbardo and his team, including medical consultants, watched students develop severe depression, anxiety, and emotional breakdowns in real time. They filmed everything. They took notes. They observed one prisoner having what appeared to be a nervous breakdown and kept the experiment going. The guards forced prisoners to clean toilets with their bare hands, do push-ups while other prisoners sat on their backs, and perform sexual acts. One student developed a psychosomatic rash so severe he had to be removed from the study. Another had what Zimbardo described as acute emotional disturbance. The experiment only ended when Zimbardo's girlfriend Christina Masloch visited the facility and was horrified by what she saw. She told Zimbardo that what he was doing was immoral and inhumane. It took an outsider, someone not caught up in the scientific excitement, to point out that they were literally torturing college kids for research. The terrifying reality. The crazy thing is, we're still dealing with the aftermath of these experiments today. The Tuskegee study is literally why many Black Americans still distrust medical institutions. And honestly, can you blame them? Every time there's a new vaccine or medical treatment, you'll see people online saying they don't trust the government. And while some of that is conspiracy theory nonsense, some of it is based on the very real fact that our government has a history of using medical research to torture its own citizens. MK Ultra techniques are still used in modern interrogation and torture. And every time you sign a consent form at the doctor's office, you're benefiting from medical ethics rules that were literally written in response to these horrors. It's like how we only have airplane safety regulations because planes kept crashing and killing people. Except instead of mechanical failures, we had doctors who apparently forgot that first do no harm was supposed to be their guiding principle. And honestly, knowing this history makes you look at everything differently. When tech companies talk about user research, or when your smart speaker is always listening, you start wondering, what are they really studying? What would they do if they thought they could get away with it? The scariest part isn't that these experiments happened. It's that they were conducted by educated, respected professionals who genuinely believed they were advancing human knowledge. Which means the real lesson here is, never trust anyone who says it's for science without asking exactly what that science involves. So the next time you're annoyed that your doctor asks you 17 times if you consent to a simple blood test, remember that there was a time when medical professionals thought it was totally fine to inject you with syphilis, dose you with LSD, or freeze you to death, all in the name of science. The most terrifying part isn't that these experiments happen. It's that they were conducted by people just like us, educated, well-meaning professionals who thought they were doing the right thing. Which makes you wonder, what are we doing today that future generations will look back on with the same horror? Sweet dreams, everyone, and maybe think twice before volunteering for that clinical trial, because apparently, trust the science hits different when you know the full history of science. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed learning about humanity's capacity for evil disguised as medical research. And hey, at least your worst doctor experience was probably just a long wait time and a cold stethoscope.